Welcome to Warriors Watch. I'm Danny Leroux, your host, and so happy to have you with us for this episode. Wednesday night featured an incredibly fun Warriors-Raptors game. The Warriors won 117-112 with a furious late fourth quarter comeback after the Raptors had made a comeback of their own in the third and fourth quarters. Big games by a lot of different guys, particularly on the Raptors. I mean, Jakob Poeltl had 11 offensive rebounds. Siakam had 14 points in the third quarter and then never came back in the game. And then a series of Warriors, Steph had 30, Durant had 29, including a massive three. Curry had, of course, had a massive three of his own. And the person to talk with me about it is Tim Bontemps of the Washington Post, back in the Bay Area after a trip to cover some of the other big stories around the league. And so this was actually his first regular season game at Oracle, so it was fun to get his thoughts on the team in person because he got to see the Warriors in person. And we also ended up on a lot of different tangents, including an extended thing on the Warriors picking up or declining the options on both Kevon, Looney, and Damian Jones. And that was a lot of fun, so we got through that. It's about 35 minutes. I hope you really enjoy it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Always happy to, man. And I forgot my copy of your book today. I'll have to bring it on Friday, but I'm excited to get it signed, and I'm excited to read it.
It's a crazy process now that people are getting into it, but I had originally thought about talking to you about the Wizards game, which is coming up on Friday night, but then when this one was just so much fun, and you and I, we talked before the game, I thought it was a natural fit because this, it was different. It was certainly it was different than the Warriors' other four games, but it was just enjoyable. I had a really fun time.
Yeah, it was a fun game. Saw a lot of interesting things. Got a chance to see the Raptors, new look offense. I think look pretty good. And we got to see the Warriors both, continue to not look very focused, as I think, people aren't too shocked about, and in my opinion, still look like a team that is out of shape and not really, committing to playing with full effort, which is why you see them generally looking terrible on defense and getting, killed on the offensive glass.
You saw a little bit about kind of both of these teams, both what intrigues you and what frustrates you. So with the Warriors, what intrigues you is that their offense, other than the turnovers, was ridiculous tonight. I mean, they were making tough shots, they were making easy shots, they were generating easy shots, and then the mistakes they made weren't... KD talked about this after the game. He said, well, we were having trouble with fouls before, we're not fouling anymore, but we couldn't get a defensive rebound, and so you have that sort of thing. And then with the Raptors, you had the young guys playing well. Siakam had a nice game. Jakob Poeltl had a nice game. OG Anunoby impressed me. But then in that fourth quarter, they reverted back to old Raptors offense, and the only reason they were able to really stay in the game was because of those offensive rebounds.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I think I think that if you're Toronto, I can kind of understand why you're going to do that. In talking to those guys the last couple of days for a story I'm going to write about them, I mean, basically what the idea behind what they're doing is to try to lighten the load on DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry up until the fourth quarter. So then those guys, in the key moments of the game can take over. And, to their credit, if you look at the final 2 minutes of the game, Kyle got a really good look from about 8 feet that he just missed. And DeMar got a really good look from probably, 13 or 14 feet that he just missed. So, I mean, I think largely their plan worked the way they had planned for it to. It's just that if you're going to do that, you need those guys to execute. And, those two guys missed those shots, and Durant came down to hit a pull-up three and then came down and hit Steph for a three. And that turned out those, combined 4 possessions and back-to-back, that back and forth twice, turned out to be the difference in the ballgame.
You run into an issue with the Raptors of just kind of the idea, as you kind of alluded to, of what they really want. And they had a stretch, early in the game where I thought they were doing a much better job of just getting good looks for kind of whoever. And so sometimes those were going out, sometimes they were going in. But to me, that's, that's a more sustainable base against a team like the Warriors. And that's, I think, the other part of the reason why what the Raptors have done in the playoffs hasn't worked is because generally you face better defensive personnel in the playoffs, and the Warriors are that kind of team. Even if they're not playing like it 48 minutes a game, they have that personnel, and so that's why I liked what they did early on a lot better than what they did late. But a few basics of what the Raptors did. So They took 27 shots in the restricted area. That's pretty good. They were 22 of 27, which is excellent.
Yeah, and they were crazy in the paint tonight.
And they were 8 of 33 from 3. So 33 attempts from there, totally good. I think that's fine. And 8 is distinctly not great, especially because...
And especially, what I was going to say, it's especially good for a team that in the past has not necessarily jacked up a lot of threes. I mean,
right.
The interesting thing about them this year is that they're both moving the ball a lot more. They had 30 assists tonight, and they jacked up a bunch of threes again, which are two things that, a lot in the past has been them kind of ISOing and then, not really moving the ball and then getting, low percentage shots. At least now, they are moving the ball a lot better for the vast majority of the game, at least, and they are getting up a lot more threes.
And you talked about moving the ball. One of the other stories to me early in the game, which wasn't as much of a factor late, except that all points count, was Draymond Green had some of the worst turnovers I can remember from him in a long time in the early part of this game, where he was throwing outlet passes to double-covered guys. It was kind of like a bad quarterback, just throwing the ball down there. And oftentimes, even though those are going into your opposing backcourt, they were still generating looks because the Warriors were never set. And so, there was one he threw to Curry. Curry was double-covered. DeRozan got it, never gave it up, got an easy layup. And yeah, I mean, they ended up with 17 turnovers, which isn't terrible. It's not, it's not where they want it to be. They love it. I think 12 is the number Kerr's used before. But it's kind of in that place where even if they had those kind of screw-ups, they were still able to win. But then you think about, well, if they could clean up the few things they're really doing wrong, then they're going to be the same world beaters they were, most of last year and especially in the playoffs.
I want to say on the stock report, Slater said to me that they've had at least 16 turnovers in all 5 games, and last year they had 16 turnovers in 3 games, which I think, which assuming that is accurate, I think that it does kind of show you just how completely out of control they have been. And it all goes back to the same thing for me. You look at this team, and they're generally playing like a team that doesn't give a crap. And you can understand why they wouldn't give a crap. I mean, when everybody comes into the season and says, if the Warriors are healthy, they're going to win the championship, and you've played 100 games 3 years in a row, even though some of the pieces are new, I can see why you'd get into a bit of a malaise this year. But at the same time, you would think that a team with this much talent and the amount of guys that are in the prime of their careers that they have would eventually start to get over that and start to look like a team that's, trying to get back into form again instead of one that's kind of just going through the motions and looking out of sync.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And they have just enough offense to kind of survive those mistakes. But at the same point, I don't want to just say the Warriors not boxing out is why Jakob Poeltl got 11 offensive rebounds. He was really working out there, and I was very impressed with him.
He's intriguing. You look at him, and stereotypically, he doesn't look like a guy that's going to fit in the modern NBA. I mean, I think most people would agree with that. He's a tall, gangly-looking white guy. You just kind of automatically assume that means he's pretty slow and plods around and can't really guard anybody. But he's got pretty quick feet. He's pretty athletic. You mentioned, I think I don't know how many offensive boards he had tonight, but I mean, he just had a ton of rebounds and was active. And I think when you look at him, he does kind of fit better than as Valanciunas does, even though Valanciunas was good when he was healthy to start the year. And it does make you wonder if when they get into the playoffs, will it make more sense for Toronto to have potentially Poeltl on the court as a defense-first center who can be a more athletic version of what they need at the 5 spot. Is that maybe in the end their best look to play him with Ibaka in the front court along with DeRozan, Lowry, and then C.J. Miles and Norm Powell or whichever of their other wings they want to play?
I think the end game for the Raptors, and it's probably not this year, is to use Poeltl in the way that they should be using Valanciunas, which is that he starts the game because the other team's going to play a traditional 5, unless Ibaka really wants that grind. But I think he's like Horford, where he doesn't. if he can avoid it. And then you play him in the
Right.
second and fourth quarters kind of as it fits. If it goes, and if you know that you're not going to play him to close the game unless it's that situation, then you can push him a little harder in those times. And I think that'll make it work. But so he ended the game with 11 offensive rebounds. Last season, the Warriors in the regular season only had 11 or more offensive rebounds 28 times. So that's about a third of the year that they had that many rebounds. And that's just one dude. And, some Kerr went off on the Warriors, basically just looking and not boxing out. And that is absolutely a part of this. I mean, offensive rebounds are a mix of your own effort and skill and opponent apathy to a point. And he did a great job. You give him credit. But the other guy that I wanted to talk about, and I actually asked Steve Kerr about him after the game, was Patrick McCaw. Because McCaw in this one, and Kerr gave a little bit of shade to Nick Young in his answer to me, because he basically said we knew this was a game where we were going to need defense, so McCaw was the guy. And he didn't, pop from a statistical standpoint. His best pass wasn't an assist. It was a hockey assist. But I just thought he looked capable out there, and I like the way he plays with other talented players, which is similar to Jordan Bell.
Yeah, I think he's a guy I think that is in a similar mold, though probably not as talented as a guy like Stanley Johnson with the Pistons. This is a very a very off-topic switch, but Stanley has struggled in the past when he's been put in charge of second units, because Stanley has a high opinion of himself, and when he's out there with lesser players, he tends to decide that he can become LeBron James and gets out of the things that he does well. And that then leads to trouble. And then he does too much and things become a mess. And not that McCaw necessarily does the same kind of things, but I think, in a similar vein to your point, I think he is at his best when he is put in a role on the court and not asked to do a lot. Like, go out there with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and play defense on DeMar DeRozan or Norm Powell or Kyle Lowry and just kind of focus on that and spotting up. I think when McCaw starts to do other stuff and he starts trying to put the ball on the floor and things like that, then he maybe gets a little bit out of what he's good at right now and gets himself in some awkward situations. Whereas, to your point, if he's out there with really good players and goes, okay, my job is to go out here and play defense and move the ball, he's very good at just sticking to that and doing it, and makes him a really effective player.
I like him in that role, and that also makes him a natural fit eventually, if they want to go this way, to fill the Andre Iguodala spot. Because Iguodala, I think, does well. I actually think Iguodala is better in the lineups with the good players than he is in the bench lineups, which was kind of the idea that Kerr had originally, part of why he moved him for Barnes. But Iguodala, partially because he's just such a smart team defender, and because on the Warriors, they're, even now, well, without Caspi and Young, particularly in the lineup, their starter-heavy units have better shooting than their backup-heavy units.
Yeah, and look, Iguodala at this point in his career especially is a guy that isn't going to provide a lot of offense, right? Like he doesn't, he's a decent shooter when he has a chance to set up, but he's not a great shooter. He's not a guy that you're going to give the ball and let him create his own shot off the dribble anymore, right? Like his athleticism's waned a bit. He doesn't have the same burst that he once did. But to your point, he's incredibly smart. He's a terrific team defender. He's a good spot-up shooter. He's a great passer. So if you have him out there with other options that can soak up a lot of the attention, he's going to be able to capitalize on the creases that he gets then, or the open spot-up looks that he gets. So I agree 100%. I think, in the long run, you would like to think that, assuming the Warriors are able to keep Pat McCaw this summer, if he doesn't get too expensive, then I think down the road, ideally for them, he becomes a guy that you could plug into that kind of a role. The Livingston / Iguodala role as that fifth guy in the death lineup now, and that allows them to have some more spacing and athleticism and defense on the floor.
Yet again, I was impressed with Jordan Bell. He wasn't perfect. He had a foul on DeRozan, I think it was, where he bit on a pump fake. But I already see a player who can be a part of the rotation moving forward. And that doesn't mean he should start or anything crazy like that. But he's smart, he's quick, and I've also enjoyed the minutes that he's played with Draymond Green, because Draymond is actually the best guy at finding Bell on the entire team, which is also vaguely true with JaVale McGee.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a better version of JaVale McGee already. right? Like, for all the things that people went crazy about JaVale last year during the regular season when he played with 4 Hall of Famers and put up numbers, and they put up, good counting stats and, possession stats. He still has no idea what's going on defense. He can't catch the ball and do anything with it besides dunk. He doesn't have a high basketball IQ, even though he's a smart guy. So Jordan Bell, though, you look at him and he can catch the ball on the roll after setting a screen and can put the ball on the floor once and go to the rim. He can put the ball on the floor once and pass it. He's able to kind of execute those kind of short roll plays that a guy like JaVale can't do, and guys even a guy like Zaza can't do. And to me, I look at him and the Warriors I knew liked him coming into the preseason, but I think it's safe to say he has exceeded even what their expectations are. And I said this to Slater after the last preseason game against the Kings. I looked at him and see a guy that I think could be their starting center next year. And he was a little skeptical about that. But I think even after 5 games, he started to come around on that. And you look and, there's a good chance David West probably retires. But even if he doesn't, he's going to occupy this same start of the second, start of the fourth role until he does. And, maybe Zaza's back again on a 1-year deal. Maybe he's not. I think, again, that's possible, but uncertain. But either way, I think Jordan Bell's already become the 3rd best center on the team. And I think if Zaza does move on this summer, I think it's very likely that he would wind up being their starting center next fall.
The other huge benefit that you get with Jordan Bell, not on the offensive end, more on the defensive end at this point, is that he's kind of a guilt-free version of Draymond at center. Because the Warriors would love to play Draymond at center as much as he could if there weren't the other side effects, that it's harder on him and puts strain also on the rest of the team. Having Jordan Bell allows them to kind of function in the same way with a different player there. And I think that what I've looked at with Bell, and I guess this is just being a Warriors writer at this point, is you look to the playoffs, and so you think about the idea of, okay, at that point, maybe Draymond's going to play in the later rounds 20 minutes a game at center. Then you start to think about, well, how should they apportion the other 28? And I think Jordan Bell deserves, or will deserve at that point, a significant portion of those. Like, I think that's where you start to get into the question then, and maybe you play Zaza like 8 or 10, and then you play David West 8 or 10, and then you play Jordan Bell 8 or 10, and then, maybe you work with it, whoever's hot, and play with it from there.
Yeah, look, the thing, not to harp on the JaVale thing, but as I said all year last year that JaVale in the playoffs wasn't going to happen, right? Because even though he had some nice games against like Portland in that comeback game in the first round, when the rubber hit the road against real teams like the Cavs, you didn't see JaVale McGee playing anymore, right? Because the defensive issues were just too big to overcome for a guy like that to play on a huge stage. Jordan Bell, even though he's a rookie, he is good enough at both ends to be a factor in the playoffs. Like you said, doesn't mean he's going to have to play 25 games or 25 minutes a game in the finals, or that he should play 25 minutes a game. But he's good enough that you can keep that basic rotation with him, Zaza, and David West. And then when you need to go to Draymond, you can go to him. And, maybe one game you'll go to him for 8 minutes at center. Maybe another game you'll go to him for no minutes at center. Maybe another game you'll go to him for 20 minutes at center. But the fact that you now have 3 guys that I think the Warriors are going to feel confident, especially after you give Jordan an entire season of being in the system, if you have 3 guys then that you're confident giving minutes to in a playoff game, all of a sudden, that just, again, like you said, it lessens that load on Draymond. And even if you do have him out there with Draymond, it does give you some of those same things. So it really is a nice setup for Golden State. And, just another example of, even if the Damian Jones pick doesn't work out, and I would say at this point it doesn't look great, you take away Kevon Looney, you take away Damian Jones, you get 2 second-round picks that hit in Pat McCaw and Jordan Bell, and the fact you didn't hit on those first-round picks starts to look a lot less damaging when you have a couple second-rounders that can play.
And they'll still have a couple shots at this because I assume they'll probably keep their pick this year because they don't really need to trade it for anybody. And then they can buy a second as long as Joe Lacob and Peter Gruber want to spend. They'll be able to buy a second. They might not be able to buy 38, but they can buy somewhere in the top half of the first round. And so they really just taking these shots is a way to do it. And if they have a 50% success rate moving forward too, that'll be fine. That you don't need to do better than that. It's great if you can, but you really don't.
If you find a rotation player a year in the draft, that is a win.
Absolutely.
Doesn't really matter where you pick. I mean, you could argue if you pick number one, you shouldn't be looking for those odds. But really, like if you come out of every single draft with a guy that can play for you, you're in business. And that's especially true if you're a team like the Warriors that already has the star level guys, and all you need to do is fill in around them with some decent pieces.
And who knows, if you're taking number one, maybe the guy's going to need to simultaneously get fluids in and out of his shoulder. So it just depends on how that goes.
Now let me ask you, even though it is your podcast, what do you think the chances are that the Warriors don't pick up the Damian Jones option
for next year? So like the one that's decided by Halloween.
Yeah,
I think it's very high that they will pick it up. And the more interesting question for me is Kevon Looney. And so Looney was actually active in this game. He didn't play. And there were two explanations that were given at the same time by Kerr. One was the stereotypical kumbaya Kerr of like, Looney he worked so hard and he hadn't been active, and so we felt bad. And then the other part was they thought he was a better fit for the game. And, both because Jonas Valanciunas was out and Bebe Nogueira was out. So what that got me thinking about is I think Looney's option is far more interesting because it's a little bit more money, and Looney, the ceiling play on him to me is a lot lower. If he works, it's going to be more like the Warriors' fifth or sixth big man. Whereas Jones, there's a chance he could be their third center, and they really do need three centers at all times with the way they're doing this. So I would say they'll pick up Jones's option, and I haven't talked to Bob. I don't know where they're going with it, but if it were me, I would decline the option.
I don't see how they pick up Looney's option with the amount of money they're going to be spending on this team. And I'm not even convinced they pick up Jones's option. Now, I think they probably do in the end, but, we're already to, October 26th on Thursday. We're not really that far away. And if you look around the league, most of these teams have already announced if they're picking up guys' options or not. So now, like you said, they have till next week. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do it, and I'm not guaranteeing that they don't or anything, but you look at that situation and you have a guy who through a year and a half now has basically shown you nothing that leads you to believe he can be an NBA player. And even though he doesn't have a huge contract next year, you still are going to be saving money, I think, if you decline his option and then sign a minimum guy. I'd have to look exactly what the numbers are because of the cap spike and the new rookie scale deals in the CBA. So I don't know off the top of my head whether that would be the case. But look, I mean, if it saves the Warriors $300,000, I mean, where their tax bill is going to be, that could be a $2 million savings at the end of the day. So, when you start to look at numbers like that, I'm not guaranteeing by any means that it happens, but I think it's a better chance than people might think that it does.
While you were talking, I keep a document of all the pieces I want to write, and I added in option decisions, Jones and Looney, and Nate and I talked about this a little bit on Dunked On I think that was Monday night, and the point that I got to in our conversation, I hadn't thought of this before, is let's say the money is dead even. The Warriors are one of the few teams on the planet that can say, we expect to get something better with a minimum salary than Damian Jones. And the team control part of it doesn't really matter because they can expect to be getting those guys in perpetuity. You look at who they can get for the minimum, especially next year if the center rotation is a little bit more open, they're going to get somebody. They're going to get somebody good. They could even, if they really liked him, they could even get Damian Jones. They could go in that direction. And so I think it's very kind of unsentimental in that way, and I'm sure they feel sympathetic to Jones because they drafted him knowing he was hurt and knowing that they were going to he was going to have maybe not a lost year, but at least a lost half a year. But at a certain point, you have to earn it, and the Warriors are deciding these things in a very different way than every other team. So I agree with you that is. I would think they would be completely justified. The only reason you wouldn't do that is if you think 2 years from now that it'll look better than that. But, I mean, for next year, I think that the odds are they would get somebody better for the minimum than him.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're asking my opinion, I wouldn't pick it up, and I am very rarely going to say you should turn down an option, but I think again, Damian Jones, this isn't necessarily even because Damian Jones had that torn pec muscle last year and that kept him out for a while, right? Like, you just watch him play, and there are very few indications that he is a guy that is going to play for you, and especially play for a team like Golden State. I mean, again, they draft Jordan Bell, and he immediately is in the rotation and playing. And Damian Jones has never shown anything close to an ability to play for the Warriors long term. I mean, you look at him, and he has some physical tools that make you think maybe he could become a player, but he just hasn't shown it. And to me, again, even Kevon Looney, Looney has played some minutes for Golden State, even when he's been banged up. Like, when he's played, he's shown flashes of, okay, maybe he can be a rotation big in the league, whereas Jones just hasn't. So I'll be very curious to see what happens with that. I think it's a really interesting thing to look at, especially, like I said, when you look at how expensive Golden State is going to be. Every potential dollar saved counts. And like you said, this is a team that can really maximize their roster spots. You look at what they did this year. They get Omri Caspi on a minimum deal. They get Nick Young. They draft Jordan Bell. I mean, they're going to have their first round pick. They're probably going to be able to buy a second, like you said. You would think they'd be better off, even if they just, even if they lose a few of these guys, they'd be better off taking a swing on another guy with the first round pick than using that on him. So that I think is going to be really interesting to watch over the next 5 days to see, does this team, officially commit to him or not? Because like you said, I mean, I think, I don't think they're going to pick up Looney's option. I think, again, he's another guy you could decide to bring back probably on a minimum deal next year if you really want to. And I wouldn't pick up either one, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
This will probably be the foundation of the piece that I probably will write tomorrow. But to walk through this idea. So the Warriors, basically, assuming they bring back McCaw, they have 8 guys locked into this roster: Curry, Durant, Thompson, Green, Iguodala, Livingston, Bell, McCaw. So that's 8. And you think, 8, that means you have 7 spots open. That's true. But 1 goes to their first round pick, 1 goes to the presumed second round pick. And those are better lottery tickets at this point, I would say, than Damian Jones and Kevon Looney. So now you're at 10. They also have the mid-level exception. They have minimum contracts, and then they have bringing back any of their other free agents that they want to bring back. Zaza Pachulia, David West, JaVale McGee, all of whom they will have early bird rights, and so they don't have to use an exception on those guys. Whether they want to pay them, that is an open question. But so the roster spots actually get narrow, and then you think about the fact that if the market is tepid overall, which we both think it will be, that it's not like guys are going to be turning down as much money to come to the Warriors. Like, yeah, they might not get anybody as good as Omri Caspi again, because Caspi's ridiculous, but they will be getting guys kind of that ilk.
They might get Caspi back again.
Yeah, they might. And so that's the point. Like, they shouldn't commit to. I'm strengthening my own position on this in the conversation. They shouldn't commit to those guys because they can do better. And that's also the other point of this is, if that's true, if that's the way they're going, I would hope in the case of Damian Jones at the bare minimum that somebody else trades for him, because there are teams that don't have the flexibility and the desirability with minimum contracts that the Warriors do. And, I could see, I'm thinking, Chicago's a bad example because they have a million centers, but, there has to be a team out there that doesn't have much cap flexibility that should just take on Damian Jones just for the hell of it. I mean, he's basically...
Well, maybe for example, maybe Travis Schlenk in Atlanta is a fan of Damian Jones from his time here and decides to trade for him.
That's a good call.
That's just total speculation on my part. Maybe Travis thinks he isn't any good. I don't know, but look, I think that would be possible. I also think that would save Golden State some tax money, which I don't think they'd mind opening up a roster spot for that. So I think that would make some sense. But yeah, I mean, look, I just think if Jones had shown anything at all like being an NBA player, I think the decision is easy. But the fact that he has not shown anything, and again, think about it this way, he's in the D League today, and Jordan Bell is in your rotation. That says a lot about the state of the center position for the Warriors. And I just, again, I don't know exactly what the savings are, but, if you could save any money by if you could save any money by declining his option and setting yourself up to to align your roster in a different way, I think that's a better plan going forward than locking into a guy that, I'm not even sure would play for them next year no matter what happens at the center spot.
And you talked about the savings for next year, and those are significant too. If they were able to trade him and not take any salary back, of course they'll probably get somebody later on who will take some of this, but the savings for him, he makes his minimum $1.3 million is what it counts as a cap hold. That would save the Warriors $4 million. That's just because of the tax. So, yep. Yeah, I mean, if you can clean that, Atlanta's a logical fit for it. I would even say, depending on how they feel on their own guys, Phoenix, there are a few other places. Now I want to write about that too. But let's get back to this game a little bit. And the moment I think that crystallized it for a lot of people was Kevin Durant's pull-up three, the Game 3 redux. And what cracked me up about it was that the guy who gave him too much space was his former teammate, Serge Ibaka. Yeah,
I mean, it was kind of funny to see Durant flying out to chase Ibaka off the line late in the game and just kind of thinking, man, like it's just weird to see these two guys now playing, on separate teams, not OKC and, not when it was OKC, those guys both were in OKC 2 years ago in that conference finals. And now, that summer they both left, one via trade, one via free agency, and Ibaka since, got traded and re-signed with Toronto. But, that was interesting to see. And it's just very interesting to see, him playing against Durant now in another jersey. That's a sight that is going to take me a while to get used to.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'm probably going to do a whole podcast on this at some point because you know how I like these sorts of minutia things, is how do you feel about the way the second unit has looked so far? And I define the second unit as who plays when Curry doesn't play.
I mean, it's still kind of hard to tell. They've been changing up a lot of stuff. Nick Young still doesn't look 100% right. They've been interchanging him and McCaw. Cassie's played some. Iguodala's been in and out. I think it's going to take a while until we really see what that group is going to look like. And I think the fact that Steve Kerr has enough options to try to kind of interchange all the time, I think you might see a lot of this season spent tinkering to try to decide what the best lineups for the playoffs will be. Which may contribute to a lack of cohesion there. But I think at this point, at least for me, it's too early to really get a sense of where they're going or what they're doing with that because they've tried so many things. But I'd be curious, though, to hear what you think about that.
I've been dancing around the issue for a little bit, but my current theory is that it's a group of players that are smart but don't play with a lot of urgency and athleticism at this point in their career. So you have like David West, Iguodala in particular, and Sean Livingston. They're all smart guys. They all make the right moves. But what's happening is they just kind of coast. And so they don't get system buckets because they have enough guys that don't really shoot much that teams can help off it. They don't get a ton in transition because they don't really have those run out guys. And then they defend fine, but they don't defend super well. So I think what they need to do is infuse those lineups with something a little bit different. So maybe that's Patrick McCaw. Maybe it's actually Jordan Bell and David West place and move David West around. Of course, he's not allowed to play in the first and third quarters, so that might be a little bit of a problem. But you have all these things that are running together, and so I think that's a part of it. And my overarching idea with the second unit is that I would love to see them try actually something more akin to the lineup that they played with. It was Curry, McCaw, Bell. I think it was Bell, Draymond, and maybe it was Iguodala. I can't remember who the last guy was. And basically what that was is just they were creating havoc on defense and then letting Curry go to work on offense. But there are parts of that I think could actually work without Curry, basically of to just push the ball as fast as you can whenever you're going to do it. Maybe you have Caspi as the fifth guy and just go in that direction, because I just think it's a group that makes sense on paper, but when you see what the product is, they just get outplayed because there isn't really an advantage that is useful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really sound theory. And again, I think it just goes back to the fact that Steve has so many options to work with. That he has the ability to afford taking the time to go through a lot of them and try stuff and interchange different guys and play one guy one game and one guy another game and try one unit one game, try one unit another game. I think when you kind of look at the roster they've got and the way Steve both A likes to play everybody and B is trying to figure out the right mix, especially when they didn't really do much in the preseason at all. I think that's why you're going to see a lot of these different options get floated out there. And, it's going to take some time to figure out exactly which one he wants to go with all the time.
I think the way I want to end this is with something I just looked up on Ben Falk's awesome Cleaning the Glass site. And so he, as a part of the 4 Factors page, has expected wins and losses. And the Warriors have played sloppy. They played inconsistent basketball. Curry had foul trouble in those 2 games that they lost. Even at this point, they're second in the entire NBA in expected wins at 3.4. That's really remarkable to me when you think that they haven't been close to their best, but they're still basically they've been the second best team in the league if you ignore just kind of some of the context that goes into these things.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to the underlying theory of the whole season, which is that if Golden State is healthy, they're going to win the championship, and it really doesn't matter what else happens. And, they can, jerk around and still be one of the best teams in the league all year. And that, wouldn't shock me if that's kind of how it goes. If they, jerk around and win 65 games. I mean, they're good enough that they might be able to do that. And, then they get to the playoffs, and when, it's go time, they turn it up like they did last year. And even last year, they won 67 games and went to a whole nother level in the playoffs. And I would not be at all surprised if we see a similar thing happen this year, because you can just already tell these guys know that they're just waiting for mid-April to come around. And, that could lead to some lackadaisical performances, but, you would have to think that when the rubber hits the road, they'll be ready to go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for giving me at least 2 pieces that I'm going to write in the near future, and of course, a wonderful conversation.
Anytime, Danny. Happy to do it, and congrats again on the book, man. I'm happy for you.
Thanks again to Tim Bontemps for taking the time to come on. You can, of course, read him at the Washington Post, and you can follow him on Twitter at TIMBONTEMPS, and you can listen to the Posting Up podcast that he does. I actually talked about the Orlando Magic the last time I was on there because you needed somebody for them, and I like talking about the Orlando Magic, so you can always check it out, though. He does great work, has really wonderful guests, and I don't know when the next Warriors Watch is going to be. It totally depends on how these next couple of games go. That is kind of going to be the flex thing for me with this, which I do really enjoy, is if a game is good and there's something for me to talk about, whether it's good or bad, I'll probably do one. And if there isn't, then I won't. And that's enjoyable for me. And then probably do some other standalone stuff too. Some interviews that I have kind of in the process lining up. And then also maybe some solo stuff I alluded to in Tim's part that I want to do something on the second unit, but I also would like to get more information. So I might wait 2-3 weeks on that and just see where things go from here, because you don't want to kind of concern monger in that way if things end up working out. So we'll really see where that goes. That's why your feedback is so important. Danny Leroux NBA at gmail.com, at Danny Leroux on Twitter. Email is better, but either way, if you take the time to write it, I will take the time to read it. I appreciate that. It is my promise. And I don't promise I'll respond because I'm really busy, but reading it is important because I really do care about your feedback. And if you want to support the show, you can leave a rating, leave a review. Really do appreciate that. That helps push us up on iTunes, get more eyeballs on the show, but we still, of course, need more. You can also subscribe, download every episode, and just spread the word of mouth, social media, whatever, wherever people will listen to you. If you enjoy this, that would be great, because there is always an information gap, especially when you start new podcasts, and I'm fortunate enough to have some reach, but it's always good to get new people. So I do appreciate that. You can also listen to this show, partners with CLNS Media. The CLNS radio app is pretty awesome. It's kind of, you can use their stuff instead. All of our new episodes go up there. Real Jam Radio's with them too. I'm going to have a new Real Jam Radio up very, very soon as well on the draft. And then have just a wealth of other things. I believe the TK show was on there and numerous other things. And it's always fun to see what else CLNS has kind of under their umbrella at this point. So you can check that out too. And yeah, I mean, if you want to, I don't have any specific sponsors for this episode, but if you want to check out, Greats is a sponsor of Real Jam Radio. It would be great. I'm just going to say Greats again. It'd be awesome if you check them out as well. Their DraftKings has a Real GM Radio promo as well, so you can check those two out and all the standards. We're actually working on getting sponsor pages up and all that kind of stuff, so it'll be exciting to do that. But I'm rambling enough. It's now the 26th. I've just crossed the midnight barrier. So you can also check out my Every Player reviews if you are a subscriber of The Athletic. And I wrote a piece. I just realized this. I wrote a piece for The Athletic on the potential eventual contenders, not the teams that are going to be there right now. I've already written that piece, but the teams that will eventually be there. So I wrote about the Sixers, the Bucks, the Lakers and the Celtics. And so where they are now, what they need to do to become title contenders, and if they get there, what they would look like against the Warriors. So had fun. That was something that a couple of us had kind of batted around as an idea, and then I finally got around to writing it. So you can check that out. And then my every player reviews for Raptors Warriors will be up in the very near future. I'm going to finish those up right now. So thank you so much for listening. Take care and make it a great day.